action a president can take without Congress. And this story is from the American Prospect. Got to give a shout out to the author David Dayen. And he talks about some specific actions that a president can do. He can lower prescription drug prices. He can cancel student debt, break up the big banks, whoever wants one, a bank account, counteract the dominance of monopoly power, protect farmers from price discrimination and unfair dealing, and force divestment from fossil fuel projects. These are just a few of the things. I'm not even going to everything, but these are some major things that a president can do without any congressional action. And a lot of things are already on the books also that people, presidents in the past have not taken advantage of. For example, breaking up monopolies. That's already on the books.
Yeah, I think that site came up with like a whole 30, like a 30-point plan or something like that on what Biden can execute on day one. And, I love it in the sense that, obviously we need all of those actions to be taken day one. We're at the point now where we need to undo everything Trump has done and then some. And when I say some, I mean a lot. But one thing that does kind of scare me or bother me, though, is like how much, power the executive branch still has without really those checks and balances, I don't like that Biden can just easily do these things as Trump just did them. I wish we had a real government that relied on checks and balances, and we just don't. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I am glad he has them, and I'm also glad that the Republicans have them too, because it gets them to show their cards. So if Joe Biden was able to do these good things, he likely would get reelected and the Democrats will continue to get reelected, but he probably won't do any of these awesome things that are on the list. And because of that, it's going to be a toss-up next time. So if he actually did go and cancel student debt and say that going forward public college would be free or stuff like that, like, it would be insane. It would be in a good way that you would be freeing a whole generation of debt. Even something so simple as the bank accounts. It goes, oh, why is that important? But that's it. That's an issue I'm passionate about, because so many people, I think I don't know if it was Nina Turner that said this, but it's really expensive to be poor. So if you're poor, you don't have a bank account, you have to go and cash your check in the check cashing place, and they take like 3%. And then if you need to send somebody pay your rent, you have to pay with a money order. That's like another $4 or $5, and then you have to go do all these things. Where if you just had a checking account, that would be free.
But sometimes like these banks now, they're like, oh, you have to have a minimum balance, so you have to have direct deposit, or you have to do this. If not, we're going to charge you $12, $13, $14 a month. So it's like they got to get rid of that too.
But that's part of the whole initiative that as part of that day one plan that they put together, where if they did this, if they, guaranteed a bank account for every American, I'm not saying it would be done like through the post office necessarily, but, it would be some government run program that I'm assuming wouldn't have these kinds of limitations, but who knows?
And I want to say another example of something that happened to a family member is that they try to put your paycheck inside a debit card instead of just giving you the check or putting it in a bank account. So then you have to pay fees to withdraw money out of your own money, to take your own money out. So they put in some kind of debit card run by, some company that pays the employer a percentage or whatever. So that's another way that they try to get them. But I also wanted to say that, I share a little bit of Izzy's concerns, but not as much as I fear the Democrats' lack of exercising their power. They're the only ones that follow norms that are not rules. They use norms. So if there's norms, that means you don't have to follow them. If we want them to be followed, they have to be put into legislation. Like, don't let the president do this, that, or the other thing. Because when the Republicans get in there, they do whatever they want. When the Democrats go in, they handcuff themselves and they don't do what they can do. The article said that the Democrats, they don't know the difference between control and power. They like to go in and win elections and take control, but they don't do anything useful with that control.
Yeah, agreed. There's no doubt that Biden or any other Democrat is just not going to have the wherewithal to really, or just the courage, I guess, to really enact any of this. But one question I wanted to throw out to you guys is, so we know that, let's say Biden were to take all these actions day one, which we know he won't, then how do we avoid, essentially what happens is at the end of every administration, we just have a flip flop, right? The next president comes in, is going to be a Republican, is going to want to undo everything Biden just did, plus did it's just the same cycle every single time. So how do we avoid that going forward? How do we avoid Obama coming in doing these executive actions, Trump coming in and undoing them, and then Biden coming in? It's not effective governing.
Well, legislation. That's when they have to come in. The Republicans like to talk a lot of crap when it's the Democrats in charge. The Democrats talk crap when the Republicans in charge, but they actually don't do as much when they got the chance. So they have to be the ones to put it into legislation. Even if they handcuff themselves a little bit, they could shame, as much as you could shame a Republican into saying like, hey, listen, you talk all this crap. Let's do this. I'm hurting myself being Biden by not allowing such systems. Put it into a law right now that there's going to be this extra restrictions. And most likely they're going to say no. But well, actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, they might say yes and then just take it to the Supreme Court later after the Republicans in charge and let them turn it over.
You got to do the right ones, like cancel student debt, right? Like, that everybody knows that that's going to help the economy because it's going to bring more people's money into their pocket. It's going to be people going to spend more on things. So that's something that they could say, well, when we were in charge, the economy went, because everybody knows the economy. And we know a lot of people, and we saw that with 70 million people voting for Trump, with a lot of times some of those folks that you talk to, they're like, well, Trump was good for my pocket. Trump was good for me. So that could be a point. You cancel student loans. That's something that it could be powerful. Maybe you don't do all the other stuff like you said. Like, okay, well, what are those saying? Like, take away, like, the next president taking this one away. But you do the right one that's going to change people's life and is going to get people to remember. Then it may make an impact on who wins, the next 3-4 elections. You never know.
Totally. You got to be selective though, because the ones that the who likes, because Republicans might like taking money away from the. Of course, they took money away from coronavirus from the military in order to build a wall or something like that. So they might like that because they think coronavirus is a hoax and they want to build a wall because they hate immigrants. So they might like that and vote for Trump because of it. So, it's selective.
You also know, it's like, we know there was some Latinos here that was like, oh, when is the Trump check is coming in? So like, like little things like that, like you get, you put money in people's pocket, people knows that like they're going to remember that and they're going to vote for you.
Yeah. So to answer Izzy's question, I'm in the direction of John. Definitely. I think you have to do big moves, right? Something that you will have public opinion. You have to change people's lives. And I think Gabe could even agree with me on this. You change people's lives. Like when you cancel all the student loans, they approximated that about $3,000 that will put back into people who have debts into their pockets. So that's a big stimulus, which is forgiving student loan debt from people who went to college, and also all these other various things. If it's big enough, they can't reverse that in 4 years. Cause I understand your point is like you have one Democratic person come in there and put in one policy and then the next person. An example of that is DACA, right? Trump didn't totally get rid of DACA, even though that was an executive order, but he knows how popular DACA is. Even amongst conservatives, DACA is a very popular program. So he couldn't just come in and get rid of that. And then another side of this that was in that article is that the Supreme Court, and I think Gabe was about to go, or Carlito was about to go to this with the Supreme Court, they know that they can't go over public opinion. So if something is very popular and it came to their desk, even they know that they do not want to overturn that popular, if it's a truly popular policy. They know, like, and I think Roberts did that with Obamacare. He only struck down a little part of it, but he didn't strike down the whole thing. So
another part of the examples that you gave, some of those examples, is that it's not the president just coming up and making law out of whole cloth. They're using old legislation to do new policies. They're using what's already in the book. So it's not the same as saying like, all right, I'm just going to do this and make it up. They're actually looking at previous legislation and see how they can massage it to something new.
I agree, but I also agree with your previous point that you have to turn these things into legislation, like long-term legislation. And how do you do that? You have to have Congress. So that, that kind of goes back to my original point. Like the executive branch shouldn't have these powers to just, throw things out there willy-nilly, because if they can just easily be reversed, then I mean, what kind of governing are we doing every 4 years?
But the flip side is, if you do get this Biden administration and they don't have the Senate, they're not going to get anything done. Literally nothing. So the executive action is at least what it was, a break lever in case of emergency that you could get something through.
I see both sides of the coin.
It will also be interesting, like how they going to rule in the next couple cases. A lot of people that lost trust in the Supreme Court, that they don't trust it. So it'll be interesting how they gain it back, to see. So that's something good to keep.
If you have any thoughts on what we just talked about as far as the executive office having these powers, do you agree with Izzy? Should we decrease the power that the executive have? Do you think Biden is actually going to do anything with his executive power without going through Congress? Let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe.